talking about Tvalim. Is it a plural Tivalin or Tavlin, like Tavshil? What's the word? So there are those in Yeshivish. It's Tavlin. Well, you have Tvalin or Tavlin. So Tivalim. So that seems to be more the grammatically correct form. It's the plural of Tevel with a tuf. But that's a little bit problem. What tabel means to spice things up in older Hebrew. So that makes sense. It would be tivalim. It'd be a plural. And the nun at the end instead of a mem is because we're dealing with Mishnaic/rabbinic Hebrew, like in Aramaic and in Arabic. But there are those who claim it's yeshivish. The word is tavlin, and that's the way most people grew up reading it, and that's the way it's vowelized in a number of books. Makes it its own word. Okay, it's a singular, and the shorish in this case would be bet lamed nun and not tough bet lamed. Okay, good question. What it should be. You look at this Gemara, you could see it. Perhaps maybe we could fit this into the machlokes Rashi and Tosfos were about to see, or more accurately, Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. What are they talking about? There's a threshold at the bottom of this is page. Pay Tessamid base. Pay Tessamid base. The threshold of the punishment. The Isser is always there. Whether or not one is held liable for doing so on Shabbos depends on whether or not he crossed the threshold. If he's carrying with himself enough of whatever we're talking about in order to get hit with the penalty. So it talks about spices. And spices used to be actually quite expensive, right? Black pepper was saying that it provoked Columbus's expedition. Where did they get pepper, by the way? This we should be noted about when the Gemara discusses pepper, because Rashi is about to mention this. What does pepper refer to in Gemara times? Pilpil. It's referring to what you and I know as either black pepper or white pepper. What is it? It comes from a plant that's native to the East. They used to get it from India. It's not really an edible plant. It's not something you eat for food, but the black seeds, the peppercorns, or the other colors inside, are ground up and used as a spice and as a preservative. That's pepper. That's the pilpil and the pepper known to man for thousands of years. And then there are what you and I call bell peppers. Bell peppers, the vegetable peppers that people grow in their gardens that you find that are ubiquitous in different colors in stores in basically all year round, are native to America. And most of their original species or the kind that they were growing, the Native Americans, were very harif. They were very sharp. That's the red peppers. Red peppers start off like jalapeno peppers, the long kind. Because of their sharpness, the Europeans referred to those vegetables as pepper also. So red pepper and black pepper, aside from their sharpness, that's all they have in common. They are not similar species. One comes from India and one comes from South America. They're not the same thing. And we breed different types of bell peppers so that they're not as sharp, but instead they're sweeter. Or they still have a little bit of capsin in them. As a matter of fact, I think red peppers are full of capsin, but not enough that it actually hurts you. Capsin. Capsin's the ouchy component of red peppers or jalapeno peppers, the really hot kind. So and chili peppers, those all come from the Americas. So they're called peppers because they have a similar capacity as the ancient Far East pepper, which is not eaten as a vegetable. So that's when Rashi says long peppers, black peppers, and white pepper, he's talking about a spice that used to come from the East that was well known throughout the world and was a commodity in places like France and Spain. And Chazal had such a thing, except they did not grow, let's say, peppers. Chazal would never have a havamina that you could buy a red, yellow, green, or orange bell pepper at a store and make a hadama on such a thing. No one ever ate a pepper straight up because they didn't have such a thing. Nor would Rashi. To them, pepper is strictly a spice. It comes from little corns like you have in your pepper grinder. That's ancient. And that's why red pepper doesn't come in a grinder. When you get red pepper to sprinkle on, I guess, your pizza, you take out your pepper grinder. It has what looks like a golden ball or a white one or a black one. You grind them up, different types of, those are the old peppers. Red pepper, what they call, is basically dried and ground chili peppers. It's not peppercorns. It doesn't need grinding in your house. So just to know, that's what we're talking about over here. So and they use the red peppers to make a derivative, mace, pepper spray. That's basically capsaicin. They derive that from chili peppers or jalapenos, the kind that burn, and it's now part of Eastern cuisine. So you could have, the Spartan people. They like cooking these large chili peppers or jalapeno peppers. You've seen them. You have to be careful. Some hotels they serve it, whatever, and it's mixed up with the other peppers. Okay, so let's see what we're talking about over here. The Gemara says, "Tavlin kedei tabel beitza kala," enough spice to season a small egg or a light egg. We're talking. Remember, we saw before. It means a single scrambled egg in a frying pan. How much pepper or how much spice does that need? I don't know. A few dashes. That's enough. Now they could challenge this. Urminhu. Urminhu really means they threw something at it, or they threw it up and collided it with something. Tivalin, shnayim, ushlosha shemot. If you're, let's say, spices, the threshold for spices is 2 or 3 names, mimin echad, o mishlosha minim, from one species or from another species, for 3 other species. Asurin are forbidden, umitz tarfim, and they join up with Zayim Zeh with each other. What does this statement mean? Let's read Rashi. Rashi says, Urminhu, from our Mishnah. We're going to challenge the Mishnah, Amas Nisan. The Katani Tvalim is Tarfin, Shnei Minim L'Chashiur. The point of the Mishnah that's to be challenged, according to the way Rashi understands Gemara, is that 2 types of spices, 2 types, species, can be reckoned together for one shiur. Okay, one shiur. What we're talking about, the shiur we're talking about in the Mishnah is how much to carry outside. So let's say you have a combination of different types in your pocket, but that's enough together to spice the egg. So that would be in the prohibition on Shabbos. Rashi continues, Shtaimus Losha Shemoth, where it says Bet V'Gimel, Pilpil Lavan, Shachor Ve'aroch. 3 different types of pepper. The kind they used to call white, black, and long pepper. Those are different names. Okay, different, or as I made a note here, Rashi would say it's 3 different subgroups within one type of spice. Okay, 3 different names because this one is, what is a name to Rashi? Lavan, Shachor, and Aroch are different names. Wa'afilu min shlosha minim. Min, in this case, chiri katan, there's no yud in it, means from 3 different types. Veheim shel isur, asur im tibelu bahen erak teira. Okay, so Rashi says 3 possibilities. 3 types of pepper, that means 3 different names. Okay, or let's say paprika. You'd have red paprika, sharp paprika, and paprika in oil or smoked paprika. Actually, you can go to the stores here, they have like 7 types of paprika, right? Yeah. And the isur in this case means it's all one type. It's all one name, Rashi would say. Let's say paprika or pepper, except some are forbidden because they have, 3 different minim, but they're all forbidden. Okay, what type of prohibition are we dealing with here? Why would paprika be forbidden?
Orla.
Yeah, well, orla, no, paprika doesn't come from a tree. Orla only applies from to trees.
Right.
Okay, so if you're talking about a spice, how do you prohibit your spice? No, the plant. Okay, only fruit trees have orla and netal rivai.
Right.
Okay, so how do you prohibit it? I don't know. It's the wrong type of. It's shmita. Someone planted them in shmita and now has to rip them out. Or they've been sold. They've been using. Usually, it's involved shmita, or it's truma. Okay, something like that. Kodesh, whatever it be. Rashi says it's tarfin l'tabelah. Im ein bechol echad kedei l'tabel v'nitz tarfu l'tibelu. In this case, he's saying that the challenge source, the Raminhu, is talking about, once again, they join together. These different spices join together to season the egg. Or I guess that's what we're talking about. And each one unto its own, the quantity of whatever one component, the third, was not enough to accomplish the goal. But all 3 taken together achieve the proper act of seasoning. That's what we're talking about here. We'll finish what the Shakavatari before we get into Tosfos, how they understand this entirely differently. So let's backtrack. Hold on, people are joining us. Welcome. He said, the Raminu is Tvalin Shnaim Ushlosha Shemot Bimin Echad Omi Shlosha Minim. Rashi says 3 names. Once again, 3 different types of pepper, for instance, or 3 different types of paprika, and those are the names. Okay, or Gimel Minim could be that you're talking about different isurim. Okay, one type, 3 different isurim, 3 minim, but they're all usr. Okay, Vahim shel isser. In this case, Rashi, I think, when he says shlosha minim, actually, it's more room to say that they might have all the same type of isser, but one's pepper, one's paprika, one's garlic, whatever it may be. So, what does this teach us? We haven't finished the challenge yet. The Amar Chizkiah says, let's go to the next daf. Hold on a second. I have to press the button. Loading. Binime matika shanu. What does this mean? Sweeteners? It doesn't mean sweeteners like you and I think. As a matter of fact, in the olden days, they didn't have sugar or sugar replacements. If they actually wanted to make something literally sweeter, what would they do? They only, honey, date honey or bee honey. That's what they do. So we're not talking about sweetness. We're talking about making it taste better. Just general better tasting. There's a biblical precedent. What do they call water that's potable? You could actually drink instead of water that's alkaline, tastes like there's something wrong in the water. Like it happened at Marah. The waters are bitter. So Moses was able to heal the waters by putting in the 8s that God had shown him. Then the waters were sweetened. And the Solomon says, Maim gnuvim yimtaku. Stolen waters become sweeter. Does water taste sweet? When Chazal and other sources refer to water as tasting sweet, it means just plain old water taste and not like something terribly bitter or salty inside the water. That's sweet. It means you could drink it down. So that's what they mean here. What?
Normal.
Yeah. So in this case, matika means what you and I would call seasoning. The point here is that these spices join together and they sweeten it. Benin matika shanu hoil urin lemate kedera. Okay. So these spices that are mentioned in this teaching at the bottom of Peites that we brought to challenge the Mishnah says the reason these spices all combine, each individual spice, the 3 different components, each one doesn't have enough to cross the threshold of prohibition. However, because altogether they accomplish the goal, now we've gotten to the threshold of prohibition. So the Gemara, here comes the diuk. Until now, we were talking Hebrew, so the diuk now is in Aramaic. The speaker, the anonymous challenger, is now speaking. He says, "Ta'ama dechazu l'mateke takdera." The reason for this particular teaching that we've crossed the threshold of punishment is because these spices actually achieve mituk, sweetening of the food. Halav hachi lo. But if the spices don't achieve the sweetening, which is not mentioned in our Mishnah, then perhaps he shouldn't he hasn't crossed the threshold of liability. The Gemara's answer is hachanami chazi l'matek. No, when the Gemara is talking about, when the Mishnah, our Mishnah was talking about 3 spices combining to cross the threshold of liability, that was the assumption. They're there to sweeten, so to speak, the egg, season the egg, and that's what they were meant for. You just it wasn't as explicit as this other teaching that was brought to challenge it. Questions about that yet? No. So we're going to go back a page and note the contrast between Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi. See, jump around. So you have here, according to Rashi, 3 species. What do you call them? Pepper, cumin, turmeric. 3 names could be red pepper, black pepper, white pepper, long pepper. Fine. Let's see what Tosfos says here. I'm going to compare and contrast here. Turns out my printing here is an old rum printing. And what we have in the Gemara is the new, I think it's Oz Bahadar. So they have a lot more suddenly in footnotes, which is kind of amazing. So Tosfos isn't what he used to be. So Tosfos says on top, the very top Tosfos there, brings what Rashi says. Perish Rashi, Kamo Pilpel Aroch, Pilpel Lavan, Pilpel Shachor. And he continues, Ufel Yisho, and according to what Rashi's saying, The Katani B'Seifa, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Shtei Shemot Mimin Echad O Shnei Minim Mishem Echad Ein Mitztarfin. That was in our Mishnah, correct? I think it was. What did he say? Not in the Mishnah, so no, it's later. Okay, it says in the Seifa. Oh, look, there's a note over here. Yeah, it says the Mishnah in Derech Masisim B'Seches Orla. Okay, yeah. Tosfos Harash points it out. See, so this Tosfos might have been taken from somewhere else. In the Seifa, it says Rabbi Shimon's talking about two names of one species. Oshnei minim, two different species. Mishem echad, of one name. They don't join together. Mashkachatla, you would have to be talking about Shnei minim mishem echad ke'ein shematzinu l'kaman. Means two species of one name, whatever that means. We're going to see in the next page. Trei gavnei ahalo. Okay, like we say, there's two types of aloes. Remember that Gemara? Might have seen it. Two types of aloes. So it's two species, but they share a name. By what can you imagine? Tzipora. Tzipora of some sort sounds like a bird, female bird. But Tziporet akramim is referring to what? A type of locust. Or pepper nowadays. We created confusion. Pepper used to be referring to a certain type of plant that produces corns that have to be ground up and have a spice. And eventually it got transferred to a totally different vegetable. That the only thing they have in common was their sharpness. Very interesting. Anything else? It's like that. That's what children do. It used to be at a corded landline house phone. So what is it? What do they call that? The thing, the part that you actually speak into. What do they call it in modern Hebrew? Shvoferes. Yeah, surprising. You borrow words here. Okay. A dumpster is called a tzfardea in this country. Yeah, you heard that? Yeah, the big dumpster is called a tzfardea. Okay. Tema of al tema. The chibish feel sheyesh lam shem echad yesh lahen lehitztaref yoter. Because they have a same name, two spices, for example, have one name, even though they're entirely different, or shem echad. So that makes them combine better, or they're both black pepper. If the point is the seasoning aspect, why do you care how that the spices themselves have the same name? Okay, yeah. So it's a question. You want to create a good taste in the seasoning, right? Is it that the two types of seasoning are both different? They have one name, and therefore their combinatory effect is greater than two spices of totally different names? Salt, garlic, and black pepper go very well together. That's what you're supposed to use to season a steak in equal proportions. If you would call the garlic, instead of garlic, you'd call it something else pepper, like a human pepper, something like that, would it have a better effect and therefore create more of a difference, halachically speaking? Remember, with regards to kashrus and all these things and contributing taste, what matters is what does it affect the taste? That's what we're going for over here. Tosfos doesn't like this. Ma mo'il Hashem ligluro matzeruf. What does the name of the particular spice have to do with whether or not it works in tandem with another spice to change the taste of the food? Yeah.
The word shame.
Yes.
You interpret it to be name.
Yeah, like Rashi.
Interprets shame as not being a name, as being a different isur, a different prohibition. And we're talking about conceptually, if I have.
No, I think what you're attributing to Rashi is Rabbeinu Tam. For example, you look in the Steinsaltz didn't even bring Rashi in his interpretation. He just went with Rabbeinu Tam. He says Tosfos. He attributes then the newer one. He makes a note that. Yeah.
I don't know about the. I'm trying to keep understanding conceptually what's really going on.
Yeah. So
yeah.
One more line.
The way I understood it.
Yes.
Because I didn't go into it well. If I have a little bit of an isser of tevel, right? A little bit. And it's boto in everything else. And then I have a little bit of shvius and a little bit of truma. Each one by itself would be bottle in the overall amount of food. But if I take the three of them, even though the three, it's the same product, but there are three different isurim. Do those isurim combine, and therefore the food would not be bottled with three?
Okay, so now
I
if
don't know if any.
allow me to read the next line of Rabbeinu Tam, and you'll be vindicated. You'll be happy because that makes more sense the way you're saying. Rashi here at the bottom, we review says mitztarfim l'tabela im ein b'chol echad kedei l'tabel v'nitztarfu v'tibalu. Rashi makes very clear that the mitztarfus here is make a taste. That's the first thing, and the second is he tells you what shemos are, minim and shemos. To him, three shemos are, lavan shachor and aroch, adjectives. Or he says, afilu min gimel minim, veim shel iser. Okay, three different species altogether would be pepper, garlic, and paprika. Okay, so Rashi, and doesn't get into different isurim. He says all iser, usser is usser. Let's read Rabbeinu Tam after the conclusion of this question. Let's read what Rabbeinu Tam says. Okay, kevan shem shnei minim ve'in ta manch b'shaveh. Okay, that's the conclusion of the question I was asking over here. Now that we're dealing with a number of different species, okay, don't have the same flavor, but all together they combine for something good. I think I mentioned the trick I like to have around the house is just to have large quantities of Mrs. Dash, because it means you put less salt in your food. And there must be 20 different spices in there that since I was a 10-year-old, we've been using around the house, and it's very good. Okay, and you could get other mixes around here. You can barely get the pure stuff anymore. Umefarish Rabbeinu Tam. Let's read what Rabbeinu Tam says. Dishlosha inyanei iser. Okay, no, it means three types of isurim. Like you were saying, Rabbeinu Tam's the one who says this. Three types of isurim. You go in shel orla, o shel kile hakarem. Orla means, yeah, I guess we're dealing with fruit. Is there any spice that they get from a fruit? Yeah, there's some spice, perhaps something that you could get from fruit trees. Or kile hakarem. Oh, it's kilayim. That's not good. You grow kilayim. That's isser anah. Vishel ashera, or a tree that was worshipped for whatever reason. Vishel irani dachas. Kari gimel shemos. Okay. Not like Rashi says. Gimel shemos means three different types of prohibited material. They could all end up being black pepper, but this black pepper came from the Irani Dachas, and this one came from something the Indians there were worshiping, etc. And the other one came from Kila Kerem. Kidarminon, what does it say? Shelo Hashem hamivio lidei makot, mivio lidei tashlumin. Shame in this case means what? The prohibition. Why? Because we have other Gemaras and say the shame, apparently the isser that for which he deserves to be lashed, is not the same isser that he violated to deserve to be have to pay the penalty payments, the tashlumin. It says in Parak HaMakabel, that's in Bava Metzia, over b'chol hashemot halalu. Okay, he has violated all these names. Names means different types of prohibitions. V'chein mash behedya b'Yerushalmi b'reish parak beis Masechet Orla. You can find also Masechet Orla in Yerushalmi. That's what it means. The katania trumas meiser struma shel demai v'achal v'kurim olin be'echad umea umitztarfin ze in ze. Okay, when you're talking about all these different prohibitions, they get nullified in by a ratio of 100 to 1, and they could all join together. V'kamar la b'gmara le Rabbi Shimon nitzracha. Okay, and the Gemara says Rabbi Shimon, we mentioned earlier at the top, this was necessary to say. Afal gav dom Rabbi Shimon ein shein shnimos mitztarfin hachamodesh akulam shaim truma. Okay, so he says different shemos don't join together, but in this case they're all truma, for example, which is forbidden to Israelites. So now Rabbeinu Tam has basically said what? Let's review. Three names means three types of prohibitions, but all one species of spice, and three different minim mean that you have different spices all together. Does that fit better? That seems to make more sense, and that's why I guess that certain interpretations. I didn't look at the article. I don't know if they're working with Rabbeinu Tam or Rashi, or they brought one or the other, but or maybe they mentioned both. So you could see. You look at this challenge to the Gemara. Tivalin shnaim u'shlosha shemot mimin echad u'shlosha minim. Rabbeinu Tam reads as spices, three different types of prohibition, but one type of spice. They're all black pepper, or black pepper, white pepper, and chili pepper all together would get us to the point of Isser. And mitztarfin, Rashi said they're all mitztarfin to combine the flavor because they all flavor or properly season the egg. Now the fellow who's carrying it is hit with a liability. But Tosfos challenges that right at the top over here. We don't have time to get into this entire Tosfos because it's more of a general Tosfos, one of those Shas Tosfoses. But we'll just point out over here the first line. L'chora nira midatani asurim mitana tu mitztarfim. First it said they're asur, and then they're mitztarfim. They join together. Da surin hainu le'asur et hakdera umitztarfim lemalkut. Okay. It means that altogether they can prohibit the kedera. That's I guess you're making a cholent here, you put in spices. That's enough to prohibit the kedera. Umitztarfin l'malkut. Okay? Mitztarfin l'malkus. It's talking about if a person were to, not talking about on Shabbos, the tzeruf, Rabbi, the Gemara, the Tosfos says that the tzeruf mentioned the last line of this Gemara is not a tzeruf to enough to season the egg, and therefore this is what the guy's carrying around on Shabbos. The tzeruf over here is enough that a person is punished for eating a forbidden mixture because that forbidden mixture had the taste of forbidden substance. Does that make sense? When Rashi's talking about the seasoning the egg, it's not necessarily talking about an egg that tastes forbidden. It could be, like Rashi said, all the spices are kosher. Just the problem is he's walking around with it on Shabbos. Rabbeinu Tam is looking at the spice and saying they're usser, they're inherently usser, and that's the challenge Gemara and the challenge Brisa. Sorry, no, it's a Mishnah. The challenge Mishnah, and we're talking about forbidden spices that have the capacity to make the entire pot taste forbidden. Why is that? Normally, to be hit with an isser, let's say, you have to eat a kazayas of the forbidden food, right? That's generally speaking. But if you're talking about spices that are forbidden from Hana because they're kilei akarim, for example, all it takes is a mashahu. As long as you could taste it in the mixture, it is forbidden. So if you have three different forbidden spices, either the nature of these three different spices is all one prohibition, or one spice which has combinations of different isurim to it. Some of the pepper is kilei akarim and some is asherah, whatever it is. And there's enough of this seasoning in the whole cholent to give the cholent the taste that we're looking for. This I guess it's a better taste. If it was a pagam taste, that is, it ruined the taste. There wouldn't be an isser involved. No sing tam with gam. If it's no sing tam, it's usser. There a question on this? No. You disagree? Agree? Disagree? So let's rewind and now try to keep score. The point is, Rashi and Tosfos look at this entirely differently, the challenge. But the bottom line is the same. The bottom line is, what is the liability on Shabbos? And the answer is, if a person carries enough spice in his pocket, that's to spice up the egg. Okay, so there you go. The Rambam says enough to basically spice your egg. And with regards to the kashrus issue, that depends if it's forbidden. There are certain things that aren't batel and certain things are. And maybe it's good. You guys have a class in Tarovas every now and then. No? Shulchan Aruch is very interesting. Shulchan Aruch for Balabatim, I think, is dangerous. Why? Because then they'll realize, oh, I've been machmir all along for something. Just a little bit of knowledge makes you be makel, and then you go home, and then your wife is like, well, but we always were taught that this is bad, or never. Why would we do such a thing? Okay, fine. There's another Tosfos over here. I think maybe Tosfos has a grammatical problem. I said lematek, right? That's right at the top. Okay. So, but just to know, the matek is a PL form. The shorish is mem, taf, kuf. But maybe it should be lahamatik, a hifil. A lot of times you have that. Nowadays, in modern Hebrew, what used to be a pal to punish was la-enosh or la-anosh. Ve'anishuoto, they shall punish him. But in modern Hebrew, it's a hifil, la-ha'anish. Okay. So the Tosfos makes a claim over here that it should be lahamtik and not lamatek. And he brings precedent, but really said you could even find perhaps in different girsas they'd say something lamatek or lahamtik. The point is all the same. Well, at the third line in this page over here, Klipea gozinu klebrumnim satisu fuwa kedei litzpoa bega katan. Enough of these different vegetable derivatives in order to be able to create dye, enough to dye, now a verb, not a noun, a small garment. Raminhu, here's a challenge. Hamotzi samonim shruyin kedei litzpoa behen dugma le'ira. The threshold for getting hit with the prohibition or a liability for carrying on Shabbos for soaked, I wouldn't say spices, because we saw samanim incorporates both animal and vegetable and even mineral products, and it's lav dafka spices, whatever gives color into the water to be used as a dye. And some of this stuff is pretty nasty. Anybody ever smell what tchela smells like when they're making it? It's pretty bad. Okay. So it has a very fishy, bad seafood smell, and which makes sense because it uses sea snails. So he's talking about they've been soaked, and that's enough to dye a small dugma le'ira. What's a dugma? It means an example. It says, Rashi says, me'at semer shehu kimin dugma. Okay, a small bit of wool that they use as a sample. Shemareh hatzeva lebal habayis. The dyer, or the guy who makes the fabric, shows this color to the Baal Bayis, that would be the customer or his boss. Kazeh, tachpots, o kazeh. Which color exact? Pick your color. Here are the samples I can make. Vehu kidei litain be'ira shel kaneh shel gardi v'shura muat. Stuff he puts it on a stick. He holds it up on a stick. Nowadays, you go to the paint stores. They don't give you small pieces of painted, sheetrock or whatever it is. Instead, what do they have? They have the color wheel. So you can get yourself a color wheel. You go to the paint store. They're actually quite useful. So they don't need to do this anymore, and everything's synthetic. It's just printed on plastic. And even our color printers are so advanced, they could, with just 3-4 types of dye in there. They use this magenta dye and a blue dye and a yellow dye, and some black, and they're able to produce on thousands of different shades that are, and the printing could be photographically real. So we've come a longer way than a little bit of swaths of cloth that a person could put on a stick. Either way, this is a lot less than a svacha. Shiur amur, Rashi says. Samonim shruyim is a much lower threshold of carrying than stam samonim. All these things that we mentioned in the Mishnah, the walnut peels and the pomegranate peels, the mad and the woad and the madder, not the mad and the woader, the woad and the madder, different vegetables, they have apparently in the Mishnah a higher threshold. So the answer they give is Omer Rav Nachman, Omer Rabba Bar Avua, Lefi she'ein adam toreach lishrot samamonim litzpoa bahem dugma le'ira. Yeah, exactly, because if you're talking about actual samamonim that a person's going to be using for serious jobs, he needs a lot more. The shruyin ones are just for small amounts, and they've been pre-soaked. Rashi says lishrot means to soak them. Umasnisin b'she'ein shruyin. Our Mishnah was talking about as yet unsoaked raw materials. The abal lishrot eino shoreh pachot mikdei beged katan. If a person's actually going to take enough klipei agozim or some other thing and start soaking them, he's going to take a lot more than enough to dye an ira. So this actually also has a nafkamina today. Like I said, nowadays everything is synthetically dyed, except for one thing where we have halacha. You have to dye it the old-fashioned way. You can't use a replacement synthetic dye, and that is tcheles. So this is something that I learned very interestingly enough from looking at the rabbis argue about if that which they're making today is the real deal. So the Gemara talks about testing or tasting the tcheles. He has a big vat, and he's not supposed to test the tcheles by testing the whole vat. He's supposed to take aside a little bit of a sample and just test that in its own little cup. Why? Because if he does this, he ruins the whole thing. And so it apostles it for some reason. So the Gemara uses the verb liton, to taste, literally to taste, tet ayin mem, tasting it. So the way you read Rashi and other interpreters, it means what you and I would say in English, test. And it so happens that tasting and testing sound very similar. As a matter of fact, in modern Hebrew, some speakers can't hear the difference between the tzerei sound and the segol sound. So, test to them. What's the difference, right? They say special. There's a difference between spatial and special. They asked this question, right? So Rabbi Reisman, if I'm not mistaken, when he was discussing this sugya, took it literally. He said it must be the dyer is actually tasting some. If he wants to taste some teles, he has to make just a small little bit, because if he tastes the whole vat, he ruins it. He took it literally. So they jumped on him and said, no, it means testing, not tasting. But lo and behold, it turns out, no. After doing enough research, there are those who claim and say that in the olden days, the dyer would actually literally take a slight taste of this concoction to make sure it had the right alkalinity so that it would work. It actually involves taste testing, just a little bit. Now, you don't want to drink the thing, but despite its noxious smell, he would actually have to taste it literally with his tongue in order to know if it was good. Okay, so there we have it, that there are examples. Teles, they would usually make a very large quantity thereof, and they'd have the problem of, but we need to just test a little bit to make this small amount. So the Gemara prescribes the halachically correct way to do so you don't ruin the rest of it. Yeah, that's why also teles is quite expensive. There could be cheaper ways to make a very similar color, make blue jeans, dyed exactly the same way from something that's chemically identical, but what are you going to do? You have to do it this way. And even for the Big Day Kahuna, it's required. So there we have it. Next thing. Meiraglaim Tana, Meiraglaim Ad Ben Arba'im Yom. Urine used for, I guess, laundering purposes. They used it as a type of bleach because of its high ammonia content, as we saw 2 days ago. So the Gemara says, yeah, urine, but once it gets past 40 days, it's already too many chemical reactions have happened. It's garbage. Read what Tosfos says. Is there Rashi on here? No. Okay, Tosfos says, Meiraglaim ben arba'im yom. Okay, once it's been 40 days old, not until 40 days old. So Tosfos tells you, Ein girsa zo nechona. The girsa that Tosfos presents is incorrect. Why? The mashma shel katan ben arba'im yom. It means, it seems to be talking about a child less than 40 days old. His urine has a certain content. No, Uvnida Paraka Isha says in that chapter in Masechet Nida, Gabe Shiva Samanim Ma'avirin, talks about 7 substances that they could use to remove blood stains. So you need to test if it's really blood. So they call it Samanim. Among them is Rok Tafel, etc. So urine's there. Kohani Dahacha Umeiraglayim. Okay, all these that's mentioned here, and Meiraglayim. The Kabbai Asam, and they asked the Gemara there, the Yeled O Mizaken. Okay, does it have to be from a child or from an older person? Yes, there's difference in their urine content. Is the Garci Shel Mem Yom. Other Gemaras say of 40 days. What does that mean? The Ein Yira Asam Nami Tanya Umeiraglayim Shech Mitzu V'chama Chimutzan Shloshigamim. Something that Meiraglayim that's already, I guess, in this case, it's not the same as fermented. It means that it's oxidated. It's become oxidized to a certain extent. It's gone through some changes, and within 3 days, okay, 3 days minimum to get the required change in the urine. So Tosfos says that obviously we're talking about something that's within the first 40 days. You get the right reaction within the first 40 days. Like, by the way, which girsa? The one we actually have in our Gemaras. Veneer kasparm de garci ad me arba'im yom, like we have in our Gemara. So that urine up to 40 days. The mishloshi yamim ad arba'im yom avrim notan ala ketem. From 3 days to 40 days, then the urine has this capacity, the ammonia power. V'altoch shlosha v'ulachar arba'im ein mavirim. Within 3 days, the first 3 days of the urine, or past the 40 days, it no longer has this capacity. Someone sent me something that says, no, not like I said. This could even be talking about human urine, the kind that they're using for these purposes. Okay, fine. Is there anything significantly different? The fact that we see here, different people have different types of urine. Okay, babies who are nursing, their output, so to speak, is entirely different from that of most other people. Correct? Right? It's true that if a baby is entirely nursing, let's say even in the first year, his urine, let's say it gets on something, will not generate an ammonia smell like other people's. Okay, That's a fact. Just like his fecal matter is entirely different than most others. There's something else going on there. He's not exposed to all sorts of different chemical processes and also different microorganisms. So it's very different. Okay, you are what you eat, and you're also, and what you eat is in what you excrete. So it would make a big nafkamina. Okay, let's see here. Because I'll even say that if you have a person who has fertility difficulties, if you're dealing with a person who's a eunuch, also his urine is qualitatively different and doesn't have this oxidizing factor that a healthy man has. And so that's another thing they bring there. What?
Scientifically,
Mhm.
the Gemara obviously accepts the idea that urine is like a bleach type of thing.
Yeah.
It works, right? Is that acceptable today scientifically as well?
Mhm.
Because then they ate more plant type of food, more normal, more original type of food. Nowadays, you have all kinds of chemical additions
So-
to it.
So
So is the urine today on the same level as the urine back then?
the nafkamina was the ammonia content. And the ammonia content that develops in the urine comes from the urea content in one's urine. And that is basically a function of the proteins he's eating. The person, let's say, hasn't eaten much and is just drinking and drinking and drinking. So he's really diluting himself, then his urine will have a very low urea content. And a person who's not drinking so much and is eating, let's say, a steak, then his urine will have a high urea content. That's the yellowness in the urine. That's why urea gets its name from urine. So that would be the factor that leads to a higher ammonia content in the urine. As for the other things that you're worried about, our diet has a lot more chemicals in it that did not exist. A lot of that does not affect the urine so much. A lot of it's simply expelled, or it stays in the feces, or it's broken down by your liver and other things. Okay, there's a lot that doesn't get through. Thank God, your kidneys are a miracle. Did you know the way your urine is stored in your bladder, for example, is almost sterile? Okay? It's filtered. It doesn't have bacteria growing in it, which is quite amazing. Because you have bacteria all over the place, and there's nothing in this world that's basically sterile unless you can artificially sterilize something. But we're kept from that. So I believe that there's no nafkamina today. You could still get this from human urine and animal urine. The point is the ammonia develops from the urea content of the urine. So that means don't try this at home. It's disgusting, but that's what they used to do. They would collect this stuff and use it for its ammonia capacity, and it does bleach things. Of course, then you have to rinse out the urine, it's like, but yeah, that's what they used to use. Let's see here. Just 2 days ago, we were talking about bleach, and I said you could go down to the store and buy yourself some bleach for a good price. And then someone gave me a jug of bleach when I came home. Very interesting. Okay, let's see here. Netter. Okay, Meiraglaim, Tana Meiraglaim. Okay, fine. Netter is natron. It's a mineral. Tana netter alexandrite, velo netter anpatrin. The natron that they would get from Alexandria, that's the northern part of Egypt, and not you get from anpatrin. I think I had a note here where anpatrin is. Rashi just tells you it's some other place. Okay, so get Kazakhstani potassium and not some inferior potassium. Next, borit. Borit is lye. That's a mineral also. What do they use lye for? Most basically, it was a base. What you and I know as basic minerals, or sometimes they could burn certain types of ash from certain type of wood, also have a basic property. And when you mix what you and I know as now today as chemical bases, opposite of acids, with oils or grease, what do you get? Rudimentary soap. And that you could use to clean away other greasy things. So that's where they would use this. Dr. Who was it? The professor was a forceful guy. He used to teach chemistry back where we were. I forget his name. So he pointed out, has anybody ever gotten bleach on their hands? Or worse, dilute hydroxide. What do you feel? If you would get bleach on your fingers and then rub your fingers, what do you feel? Burn. Well, no, not burn. If it's dilute enough, that doesn't burn. Bleach doesn't burn necessarily, but you feel there's a sensation between your fingers. Get a little bit of bleach there. It feels soapy. It feels smooth, like there's soap there. And indeed, that's what's happening. The little bits of fat in your skin are reacting with the base that's now in your hands, the strong base, the hydroxide or the bleach, and it's actually turning your hand into soap. Okay, so don't do that. Wash that off right away. Don't do that. So that's what happened. They would use a little bit of lye. Lye on a human being creates soap. A little bit of the oils in his skin mixed with the lye, and that has a cleaning capacity. Make sure to dilute it so you're not really hurting yourself. Amar Rav Yehuda, zeh chol. This is a type of sand. Okay, this lye, it's a sand. What? That doesn't make sense. So why don't you just say chol? V'hatanya, borit v'achol. We have a brayso that says borit and sand. Borit is not sand. So Ella, my borit, kavrita. No, okay, so borit, before we conclude, I told you it's lye, but the Gemara is assuming it doesn't know what it is. It must be this lye or borith, for lack of a better translation, is kavrita. Kavrita is sulfur. Okay. Well, wait, how does that word work? It's like the Hebrew word gofrit, except the gimel is replaced by a kaf, they're cognates, and the fe is replaced by a vet. So kavrita is gofrit. What was gofrit called back in the olden days? Brimstone. Okay, it's flammable. Why are matches called gafrurim? Where'd that come from? Yeah, because they put sulfur on the edge of the match. That's why the Chafetz Chaim referred to what you and I called matches, atzei gofris, or sticks with sulfur on them. Okay, and then they're going to challenge this. Meisvei hosifu alihem achalbitzin v'alyunin v'aborith v'ha'ahal. They added onto this list of what? Let's see Rashi over here. Hold on. Rashi's not there. Hold on a second. What are we talking about? Rashi says Le'inyan Shvius. All these on the list are things that grow from plants. So they made a prohibition, a gzera against people using these things, even if they're not necessarily eating them. The problem with Shvius is that you're not supposed to be doing agriculture. So what were people doing? They were cheating. They were planting things and saying, "Oh, it's just growing wild." Speaking, right? It's just growing wild. But they knew that people were planting it themselves. So they said, if you want to take anything that's a safiach, you have to show it you didn't plant it. How do you indicate that? You have to go out to where it's not private property. You go, to the park or something where people don't plant, and then you could pick vegetables there or whatever it is you need to for your purposes. So Rashi mentions the chalbitzim are called latrun and the leunim are la'ana. That's wormwood, and kavrita he says is gofrit. I'll read you over here. I looked in for these old translations. It's good to go to what's his face Sansino. Chalbitzin they call Star of Bethlehem. That's a type of plant they use for dyeing or cleaning. And leunin is called a garden oresh, or what's called French or early spinach, and sometimes even used as a replacement, therefore, in people's diets. Borit is what we're talking about, which we called lye, but right now they're still disputing what it actually is. And ahal is aloes. Aloes have all sorts of amazing properties. They could be used, they're used topically, and they're used as cleaning product. There's whatever, you could do a lot with it even nowadays. I recommend everybody grow their own aloe because the stuff they sell in the store has additives and it's diluted, with a little something gelatin and other things. Just get the real deal. If you want, I could give you some. So he says here, that's the edit. Now let's formulate the kasha. What is the kasha? If kavrita is sulfur, as you just said, sulfur is a mineral. They actually dig it up near the Dead Sea. Sulfur is not applied to shvius because shvius has to be something that grows from the ground. It has to be plant. Well, yeah, it has to be a plant. Okay, so in this Mishnah seems to be saying that the kavrita is a plant and not a mineral, like you're saying. Are you allowed to dig things out of the ground? Can you mine during shvius?
Yes.
Yes, because that's not agriculture. Okay, you're actually technically mining hurts the earth. It doesn't give it a rest. It's not letting it lie fallow. It's destroying it. Right? Yeah, big problem. Okay, so let's answer this question. I hope. Kavrisa misa b'shvius. Okay, zaklal kol sheyesh leikar yesh lo shvius, or she'ein lo ikar ein lo shvius. Ikar means roots. Okay, if it's the type of thing that has roots and grows from the ground, shvius applies to it. And if it's the type of thing that doesn't have roots in the ground, so it doesn't. But what else comes out of it? Aside from minerals, what else to what else does Shemitah not apply? Mushrooms. Okay? It's not the same thing. Mushrooms and truffles, the rest of them, Those, as we know, even Chazal say, those are not plants. Ella, my borit, ahala. Okay, it must be the borit we're talking about is ahala. But that was the next thing on the list. Vatanya boris v'ala, you just said borit and ahala are plants on this list. Ella, trey gavni ahala. Nope, two types of ahala. There's the ahala, that's the plant, that's on the list. And there's the ahala that we're calling borit, which is apparently some sort of mineral. Okay, so I don't know why they would call this substance ahala also. It's totally different. But either way, that's the bottom line they have over here. Let's read Rashi over here. He says, "Sheish lo ikar shenishrash ba'aretz." Put down roots into the ground. Lofi da'ati tornita the garcin Masechet avodah zarah. The tornita that's mentioned in avodah zarah, davar she'in lo shoreshu. Truffles don't have roots, right? And what else he says? Who? Kimo zeh velo kimoshim farshino to piona. I don't know what that is. Somebody know French enough? Okay. Or an oren, whatever. There's a line over here. Either way, Rashi says, so I think we're talking about something that's more of, the mushroom types. Let's see a little bit more. Kimolia. What is kimolia? Anybody ever use this stuff? How they write in English, just write Chymolia, whatever that is. Rav Yehuda, they call it shlof dots. Rashi says loid parish of al kach shemo. Shlof dots in Mishneh Hebrew. Sansino says shlof means to take something out of its sheath. Lishlof means to take out your gun or to take out your sword, right? And dots means to stick it in. Shlof dots means take it out, stick it back in. Why would that be its name? I don't know, but that's what they say it means. Okay. I guess they're used to be using it more. It's apparently also some sort of vegetable. Next, ashlag, which we called potash. Amar Shmuel, Sheltinu l'chol nechute yama, Ramuli Shonana. Shonana? Okay. That's what they called it. Now, why would he ask Nechute Yama? The sailors are sailors today known as people who are experts in flora and fauna and mineralogy? No, but they did get around more than other people, and they get to see more things. So most people, you live your life, you live in your town, you stay in your country your entire life. The idea that you can go abroad for a nice vacation was almost unheard of. At least Jews around the world, they made pilgrimages to Jerusalem, but there's no reason why a Jew who lives in Rome and occasionally makes the pilgrimage for Pesach would then decide, you know what, I'm going to go even farther east and see what Bavel's like. That wasn't something they normally did. Or just say, no, I'll move to Alexandria in Egypt and change my life around. So apparently Nechute Yama know a little bit more about this, but that's what he says it is. Do you guys have a translation there that fits this better? Shona'ah? No? Okay. Next. Shona'ah Shemei, Mishtachas Benukva de Marganita. You can find it in the holes in these pearls, means the clams that hold them. Umapkile beramtza de farzla. You use these metal, Rashi says a shapud. Shapud is usually a spit, like a stake, means a pointy metal thing you could use to take out this material, and you could use it. Well, from the clam. Yeah, from the clam. So most people, you get the clam, you just want to take the pearl if it has one, but there's also some minerals against it that are there, probably some sort of sedimentary type of thing. And that brings us to the conclusion of that. Let's start the Mishnah because we have time. Til peles kol shehu, a little bit of pepper, any amount. Vitron kol shehu. This is a tar that they tree-derived tar. Can you get tar from trees? Yes. You burn all sorts of things, you get tar. For example, tobacco. That's not the tar that they get from fossil fuels dig out of the ground. Where do you get that tar? Where does the tar come from in cigarettes? Do tobacco leaves have tar in them? They add tar? Where does that come from? Rather, what was it again? Oh man, I'm missing the old chemistry teacher who taught us the same thing I mentioned before. Also burned a cigarette in a test tube for us to scare kids straight back in 10th grade to stop smoking. Okay, most guys didn't smoke, but apparently he did catch a student smoking and wanted to show him, here's a cigarette in a test tube, and all the disgustingness of the cigarette will stay in the test tube as it's being burned. So he sealed it but gave it an oxygen supply. Have you ever seen a cigarette burn in a test tube? So tobacco leaves are just leaves, but when they burn, they create tar. Okay, and it's pretty amazing. It says, and that's what you're inhaling. So you just don't smoke, scare straight. So this tar is the type that they would get from the sap of certain type of trees. Also, that's kol shehu. Mine besamim, mine matachot, kol shehin. Talking about different spices and different pieces of metal, kol shehin. They all have a use, so any amount. In the olden days, they did not just throw away things like we do. They didn't have garbage in the olden days. The only thing that gets thrown out was, well, if you had old broken earthenware pots, so you'd break it in earthenware and just let the shards on the ground, and eventually they would rejoin the ground. And if you're dealing with anything that was animal or vegetable waste product, for the bones from your food and the peels and shells from fruits and vegetables, there was a garbage pile a little bit away from the houses, and it never really got that big because everything there was biodegradable, and there were scavengers come. Garbage used to not really be a problem, and there'd be a place a little bit farther out where they would dump the chamber pots or they'd have the outhouse, and that was it. But they didn't have plastics. They didn't have the mass-produced garbage that every day, if you have a family of 6, the guy has to take out a huge bag of trash with all this waste, and it adds up to many bags a week, and even our taxes go to try to dispose of this. They never had such a thing. And if you had a little bit of metal that broke, let's say anything tchotchkes, you have children's toys, how much metal is in a kid's car that his older sister stepped on and broke, and now it's junk? So there's a lot of plastic there. There's metal in there. There's axles. There's all sorts of things. They used to save metal. What they used to use the metal for? Melt it down and make something else out of it. Okay? Sewing needles. People didn't throw away sewing needles. That was a needle that had a use. Or a pin to hold the hem together while you sewed it. Why would you throw away such a thing? By the way, they only had a few different types of metal back then. They had a little bit of tin and iron and some precious metals and lead. So if you had a little bit of iron or tin, you saved it to make the next thing. So they wouldn't throw out such a thing. Nowadays we're very spoiled, so, and also very wasteful. My daughter found what looked like an old watch battery. Anybody see a watch battery? You place the battery in a watch. What does it look like? A little bit smaller than a nickel, and it looks just as shiny. So what do we do with those old batteries when they're done? When we're done with them, or any batteries? What do you do with your batteries? Throw them out. Can you imagine? Okay, there's copper in there that used to have some value to it. It's like, what are you crazy? You can melt them down and use them for something else. But we dispose of so much metal. Okay, aluminum. Okay, I'm not. Aluminum's not that expensive. Well, if they never had aluminum's taken right out of the ground, just like it's very abundant in the Earth's crust. But what do? That's many of us keep our food specifically in what's called a disposable aluminum pan, and we cover it with a sheet of aluminum and single use, and we throw it out. The quantities of metal that we waste is unfathomable to Chazal. The fact that we have such a metal and that we dispose of it so easily is unconscionable. So nowadays, I would say that, I don't know, you say mini matachot, if a person has just a little bit of metal, nothing in his pocket, you'd say, what use of this does it have on Shabbos? Perhaps you'd have to at least carry one AA battery, one AAA battery, something big enough, or at least a sewing needle because it has a use. But if it's just the metal to make a sewing needle, maybe we'd say nowadays people don't have a use, or is it an eternal gezerah of Chazal that because in the olden days people knew how to use metal and save even little scraps of metal for something, then all bets are off. Certainly with regards to gold and silver, which we measure in fractions of an ounce, that does have. But here he's talking about all types of metal, even the cheaper types of metal. Okay, tzarich iyun gadol, and we'll see you on Sunday, I guess.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.